Good evening. I'm glad to have a little bit of time with you again this evening. I know I enjoyed the last week or so, 6 days we spent on the steps to freedom. How did we get this freedom in America? How did we get in with liberty and justice for all? And how did we get the freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom to assemble and freedom, all those freedoms? And if you didn't get a chance to listen to those, they're still online. I'm not sure how long they'll be online, but for a little while. They won't be on there permanently. But this evening, we're going to start something else. This is just things of interest, perhaps to some of you that are newer members. Some that are older might enjoy just memories. Sometimes sitting around the house just talking with the family about what we did, where we came from. But I thought I'd take a couple of nights and just tell a little bit about our church and how we got here. And if you listen to much of my preaching, you've heard my testimony. I was saved at 18, grew up in what I would have called a good home. My dad drank more than he should have, and left when I was a boy. My mom was single for a while and then remarried and to a very good man, but we weren't a church-going family. I got saved, and most of you heard the story. I got saved just after I got out of high school, just a couple days before college. And just something clicked. It was sovereignty of God. I have no problem calling it that. God had a plan for my life, and I think God nudged me and moved me a direction, and I'm so very grateful he did. And never been a day from that weekend after I got saved to today that I've not spent time in God's Word, and how very, very much I owe him. I owe him every breath. And I'm like you, I'll pout and complain when things are hard, but he's got every right in the world to do anything he wants. We're the potter, and he's the potter, and we're the clay, and no matter what he would do, no matter what price I'd have to pay, I could never pay him back for how much he did for me. But skip through college. My wife and I had a plan of going to the mission field, very burdened for the world that no one seemed to care about. Even now, ask yourself the last time you heard of a missionary going to France, to Spain, Belgium, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Poland. I know one missionary that was in Poland and he left. I know one other missionary still in Poland, one missionary couple. But hardly anybody goes to Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Europe is spiritually dead beyond words, and I just felt like I ought to go where there's the least getting done for God, and at least try. And God didn't let me, and that's another story. But my deacon in my home church, my pastor in Indiana, and the president of my college all together agreed to send, basically, this is where I should go. And it was their counsel and their direction. I had no problem. My wife and I came. So here's where I want to start just for a few minutes tonight. And I want to take just a little bit of time and we'll kind of walk through how did we get where we are here at Faith Baptist Church, and what was it that brought us to this place. And when we left Indiana, came to California, dropped my wife off at her home in Northern California, same area I lived. My parents and her parents lived in the same general area, within a couple of hours of each other. And I actually took a Greyhound down here. I didn't want to leave my wife without a car, and our car wasn't worth much, so she stayed there. I took a Greyhound down to my brother's home in the Oceanside area and borrowed an extra car he had, came up here, and I spent some time, I don't know how much time, a few days, just driving and praying. I don't remember where I stayed. I think I drove back down to his house and stayed there, I believe. I'm not positive about that, but I drove, and I just drove around the area. Now, in those days, there were 10,000 people in Lake Elsinore. There were 1,000 people in Wildomar, 1,000 people in Marietta, and about 10,000 in Temecula. And that's 37 years ago memory, and that's real general. So, but about 22,000 people in the whole valley. And around where Wildomar and Marietta is just rolling hills, and then there were horse tracks. There were horse race tracks and horse training, breeding and training for the thoroughbreds all over Marietta. And so we came here. I came first by myself, drove and prayed, and just looking for God's direction, and wanted to be sure what I should do, how I should do it. And I'd prayed. Now, we'd already decided we were coming, but I prayed, God, if you would, just for my wife, and here I'm going to do something I've never done before. My wife's willing to follow me to do something I've never done before. We didn't have any money and just came with a few dollars in our pocket. And I mean a few, I mean like $30 or something. My brother, when I was with him, he was unsaved at the time. I remember him giving me $200 bills, and I said, "What's this for?" He said, "In case you need it." I said, "I don't need it." He said, "Well, hang on to it in case you do need it." Well, of course I needed it. It was my first month's rent. When we finally rented an apartment, it was $200 rent for a furnished apartment, but I'll get to that in a minute. But I drove and prayed, and one of the things I prayed, I said, "God, if you'd give me kind of a welcome sign, could you give me a free place to stay? Just for a short time, a few days, few weeks, whatever. A free place to live in a town I'd never stepped foot in before, in a county I'd never stepped foot in before. That would be kind of a welcome home." And I wanted to be able to say that to my wife. And such a good lady. Has followed me all these years and been willing to trust me. And I've not batted 1,000. And there have been difficulties and trials, and she has stayed by my side. And there's no way I could do enough for her the rest of our life, for all that she's, how faithful she's been, how good she's been. But there's a deacon in our church in Northern California. He grew up here, and his father and mother lived in this area, still elderly people. And he was an old cobbler, a shoemaker, repaired shoes and polished shoes, dyed shoes. But he actually would, if you had a crippled feet, and he would make some shoes from scratch. And just a neat old godly couple and their adult daughter. They lived in Lake Elsinore. And so I got to meet him. And I had gotten one letter from his daughter that maybe a couple letters, because we had communicated we were coming to the area. They were out of church at the time. And Hank and Marge Boosinger and their daughter Joyce, their son Ed was the deacon in our church up in Northern California. They kept wanting me to come. So I got to visiting with them and talking a little bit. And I might have been here a day, 2 days, 3 days. I don't remember for sure. Back to my brother's, got on the Greyhound, drove back up north. And then my wife and I came down. But before I left town, I was there with the Hank and Marge Boosinger. And Mr. Boosinger said, "Hey, you got any idea where you're going to stay?" I said, "No." He said, "Why don't you do this? Our motor home is in the driveway." And he said, "We've got a extra entrance into our basement." How many houses in this area have a basement? But they were Midwest people, moved out and built their own house, so they built a basement. And he said, "Our motorhome's in the driveway. There's a door from the driveway down into our basement where there's a washer, a dryer, and a shower, and a full bath." And he said, "Oh, why don't you just stay in our motorhome for a month or so, maybe a couple months. We won't be using it for a little while. We'll go on some vacations in the fall, but you can stay there." And I thought, there's my welcome sign from God. They didn't want any money. They just let us stay there. And I can't remember. My wife would know better than me, but she won't sit and talk like this. And so we stayed a month or two, I don't know. And then we found a little apartment, $200 a month, and rented that. And it was furnished, a bed, a couch, roaches. And anyway, it was rough, to say the least. 226 East Peck Street. And it's still there, the apartment, little tiny apartment building, 2-story, maybe 8 or 10 rooms in it, and very small place. But it was where God had us for the moment. Now we went from there, and Hank Boosinger, the older gentleman, he said, "You ought to start the church in Wildomar, not in Lake Elsinore." I thought, Wildomar's only got 1,000 people. 1,000 people. There's not even a building in Wildomar. But I've got this idea that you ought to listen to older people. They probably know more than you. And Lake Elsinore had several churches, a couple of Baptist churches even. And so I thought, well, all right, I'll try and figure it. So there was the Wildomar School, and right across the street from the school was the post office. Now it's a little burrito, taco, enchilada shop. Some authentic Mexican food, and not like a Taco Bell. They got good food. And so I went there and asked if I could use the auditorium that I was starting a church. And they said I have to go to the school board. Long story short, I got a permission for 6 Sundays. And they graciously said, you can use the building for 6 weeks to establish a congregation and find another building. I thought, what do you do in 6 weeks? I'll be lucky to have people coming in 6 weeks. But It was 6 weeks. And sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. And give us this day our daily bread. And I thought, you know what, I'll take these 6 weeks and see what God does. And so for the next, I'm going to say 6 weeks, my wife and I, before church started now, we went and I'm a terrible speller. I'd never taken typing. And Mr. Boozer had this old beat up, old-fashioned typewriter with an old worn-out ribbon. I didn't know you could change the ribbon on a typewriter. I didn't know you could clean the letters that would swing forward in those little arms, and all my O's were solid and the P's were solid. This thing was so old. I didn't know why a lot of the letters didn't look quite right. But I made a flyer, Faith Baptist Church, and where we're going to meet, and used rub-on letters. Some of you that are older remember those, and you try and draw a pencil line and rub on letters, and then typed, and then rub on letters, and to get different size typing. And then I took it to a printer and had those printed. And then for 6 weeks, once I got an okay to use the school, for 6 weeks I just started right at the Wildomar School, started going one direction, up Central, knocked on each door, and then I went down the other direction, knocked on each door, and slowly worked my way every door in Wildomar. And my wife went with me sometimes not. She'd go with me knocking on doors, door to door, and she'd say, you know what, I'm pretty useless just standing here with you. I'll go across the street. And we'd go up and down the streets, knocking on doors, no children, no money, and worked our way up Grand Avenue and around the valley. And I'd trade off. I'd go this direction, that direction. We have a lake, for those of you that are not from our area, and worked my way slowly around the lake till I ran into myself at the other end of town. And again, only 10,000 people in one town, only 1,000 people in Wildomar, knocked on every door. And I don't know that I knocked on every door prior to our opening day, but knocked on doors. Opening day came, and I had, I guess about 100 names of people who said they'd come that opening day. Now, I'm not stupid. I know they're not going to all come. And so I knocked on doors, and I made a list, and I went back. If you were nice to me, I was going back to your house. And if you were nice again, I was going back. And I had a little 3x5 card with names and addresses, and I'd go back over and over. If I met you the first week, I was at your house 6 times before the opening Sunday, if you were nice. And if you weren't nice, I wouldn't go back. I'm looking for the people who God's working on. And so opening day, 53 people show up in the Wildomar School, and my wife taught children. I'm going to say that she taught 5th grade and under. I don't know that, but she taught a children's Sunday school and then a children's junior church. I did an adult Sunday school, adult and teens, and then I did the adult preaching service, and one gentleman got saved in my service. I think my wife had 8 children trust Christ, and we had a nursery that some people we met, and one of the first days knocking on doors, they said they'd work the nursery. My wife taught children. Then I realized, my wife needs church, and she can't do Sunday school and church. So we went to a children's church service, and no Sunday school, or Sunday school, no children's church. I want to say she taught Sunday school and no children's church, and we just started having church and praying that God would provide. And people got saved day after day. And as the weeks passed, people, of course, we only had 6 weeks, and people were enjoying. Now, Sunday night, I started a church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. So as I was knocking on doors, I was looking for a place to meet Sunday night and Wednesday night. I had to make enough money to rent is $67.50 for the Sunday morning using the Wildomar School. That was janitor fees and things. And so I just prayed there'd be enough money in the offering to pay the next Sunday. They let me pay week to week. And these are old days. And no insurance and no contracts. And it would just hand them the money, and then the janitor showed up. And those were great days. And so the 6 weeks. But night service, I met this couple, and they said that we could use their home for a Sunday night service. And so that night we had church in a living room, 8 of us, maybe 10 at the most. And Wednesday night, 6 or 8, 10 people in another home. And so we met Sunday morning in the school, and Wednesday night in a home, Sunday night in a home, Wednesday night in a home. And we did that. Then about 5 weeks into things, across Clinton Keith Road, across the freeway, out into where there's a housing tract now, there was one lone house out in the middle of the acreage, several hundred acres of open field. Frank Pasquale, who years ago in the 60s had been mayor of Lake Elsinore, he had a nice big home and a little guest house, and he built a clubhouse. That clubhouse, he designed, it was going to be the clubhouse for a trailer park. He built the clubhouse and never built the trailer park. And so he just something he rented out for weddings, parties, whatever. And so we talked to him, and could we rent your place? And actually, the first time I was there, I, my wife and I went up there, and he wasn't there. His wife was. She said, "Well, my husband's going. I have to talk to him." She said, "Let me show you around." And so we wandered around with her. It's a nice old lady, an Italian couple, really gracious lady. And she said, "You'll have to come back and talk to my husband." Well, I come back, make an appointment, come back, and just me and her husband. And we look at the buildings again. And he said, "You know, we've had several churches want to rent this, and we wouldn't let them." He said, "But my wife likes your wife, and my wife would like some company." And it ended up, they wanted us to rent the house next door, a little 2-bedroom house next. They had a very large, nice home, a little two-bedroom. He said, "Why don't you rent our house?" And so we rented that house, utilities included, for $250 a month. And I did not have $250. I'd already spent the $200 on the rent in town on East Peck Street. And so there I am in this house, but God opened the doors up, and the bills were paid. And we rented, and we were there till our 5th anniversary. Lots of fun things happened. Big days and buses. We had our nursery first in our living room and bedroom, and then we bought a bus. Like, you know, the old Partridge Family, an old multicolored bus and long shag carpeting, and we built cages with PVC pipe and 2x2s, and we built 2-story double-decker nursery cages in the bus, and the babies would go into had to have a door so they wouldn't fall out, and there was no room in the bus for cribs, and so we had a mobile nursery. It was a driving bus, and we could drive it around. If we went to have an activity, we'd bring our nursery with us. And one of our school teachers right now, Caleb Beal, I remember the day his parents and our school principal, he and his wife, and Caleb was in a car carrier, he and his twin sister, Carrie, and carrying him into that nursery bus. And I'm thinking, oh, they'll never come back. Nobody puts their twin kids in a bus, and that was craziness. And they've been here with us all these years. But so we had wonderful days. We baptized in a horse trough, and might be, as we go through this, I might put in some video footage. We've got a little bit here and there, but first a horse trough on the patio, and then he didn't like us, the landlord didn't like us using all his water, so we'd fill the horse trough. We put the horse trough in the back of a pickup truck, filled it at our home. We eventually moved around the corner, filled it from our house, and then we drive the horse trough over in the back of the truck, climb up into the back of the pickup, baptized there. It was, you wouldn't even believe, why would anyone go to church there? Then it got worse. 5th anniversary, just 100 yards or so away, we bought 2.5 acres, and we put a tent up, put a little mobile home my wife and I moved into. And we permitted the tent, but the house, but we didn't permit the tent. We just put it up. It's in the middle of nowhere. And we met there, our 5th anniversary. We planned a big day, ran the buses. We had the biggest children's choir in Wildomar, because there was no other choir in Wildomar. But you look at pictures of it, there might be some we'll put on here. But I imagine there was 100 or 150 kids that came from the parents, and then the buses. We had a couple of buses running, and we had a big crowd of kids. It was so hot. It was in August, and in a tent. And we supposedly, I had a guy at the property. I said, "You count people as they come in. It's your one job today. Count everybody that comes in the property." He said he lost count at 700. Oh, there were people everywhere, and filled that tent up, and kids everywhere. Baptized a bunch of people in the horse trough again, and we just had carpet on dirt and chairs, and all the stories of how God blessed us. You know, there's some things God did. I look back and think, I couldn't have done those things. There's no way, humanly speaking, these things could have happened. The orchestration of details, people moving to the area looking for a church, young couples wanting to serve God, wanting to be involved in the ministry, and they just came. And some moved from out of state, from other places. They didn't know they were moving to Wildomar to go to Faith Baptist Church, but they did, and God brought them there. People from different cities, and one of our most faithful couples still at our church. Our first visit to before they were married, to the wife's home when she was single. She was lived in the Tustin, Irvine area, and we drove in to see her and visited some other people. And they came, and people from Riverside, and people came from all over to this little tiny church in this little tiny town called Wildomar. Hundreds of people came. That dirt parking lot was packed with cars, and perhaps we'll get some pictures in here. But we were there on our 5th anniversary, and of course it was a big day, very unusually big. That's not how it went on, but the tent was full. We went on 5 years there. So about our 10th anniversary, we had purchased another piece of property to put the tent on there. And we just, things were just so slow, couldn't get the ball rolling. And this, where we meet now, was an old hospital, an actual functioning hospital. And, but the hospital had gotten older and dilapidated, and they moved across Clinton Keith Road to where the hospital is now in our town. And the hospital this building we're in was the hospital. Our church auditorium was a doctor's office. And this was up for sale, a couple of $1 million they wanted it. And we began to pray, and I'd drive and pray and drive around the property and pray. And they wanted $2 million, and then they wanted $1.5 million, and then they wanted $1 million, and then they wanted 500,000. They said, we'll trade you your property, because we had that 2.5 acres, and it was right near their hospital. They said, we'll trade you your 2.5 acres and $500,000. It was really a good price, but I didn't even return the phone call. I didn't have any money. I'm a Baptist. Don't accuse me of having money. And then somebody broke into this place. They left records, they left drugs, they left their x-ray machine. I mean, they just moved out. And I don't know who was in charge, but I know who knows how many laws they violated. But they got broke into and somehow disabled the alarm, and every wall was broken, every window was broken, every toilet broken, water everywhere, from sinks and faucets being broken. And their pharmacy had been left unattended, and there was still lots of drugs. When we came down, there were drugs just scattered all over the floor from the pharmacy that they'd left. And so anyway, we got the property. They called and said, we'll trade you straight across 16 acres and our buildings, which at that time were condemned, for our 2.5 acres. And I said, I'll talk to you about that. We traded straight across. We had to come down immediately, take care of the drugs, put them all, we shoveled them into a pickup and drove up to their current site and said, you want these drugs, or should we take them to the police department? And they said, oh no, we'll take the drugs. And literally shoveling who knows what all those drugs were. And that is how we got to this building, how we got to this property. And we got this property, and that was all right around, right before our 10th anniversary. So I'll just stop there, and then we'll pick this thing up, and we'll do a little bit more tomorrow.